Raising teenagers is hard. Understatement of the century. This is Mentor Select. Mentor Select. Parenting teens to be successful adults. Mentor Select serves parents who are raising teens. Every week, Derek interviews leading experts that work with teens, educators, counselors, mentors, and authors to give you practical tips, strategies, and resources that you can incorporate immediately to better connect and understand your teen. All while parenting them to be successful adults, focusing on social and emotional development, something that's left out of the classroom, but not in ours. Be sure to subscribe, share, and rate. This is Mentor Select, and this is your host, Derek Phillips.
Welcome to episode 80 of the Mentor Select podcast. I am so thrilled that you joined us this week. Parents, you're in for a real treat today. I have Dr. Stephen Carter with us on the Mentor Select podcast. How are you, Dr. Carter?
Hey, I'm doing well, Derek. How are you today? By the way, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well. Happy 2020.
2020.
It got a certain ring to it. I think it's going to be some big accomplishments in 2020.
Absolutely. You're so nice, they named it twice.
Exactly. So where are you joining us today, Dr. Carter?
Frankfurt, Germany.
All right. That was my first duty station in Würzburg, Germany.
Würzburg, yeah, I spent time there as well. Absolutely beautiful. Right off the river.
Yep. Beautiful. Well, Dr. Carter, helping parents, just give them the resources and strategies that they can just really guide their teens to be successful adults. So we're just going to jump right in and just get a little background on your experience.
My experience working with teens, I've actually been mentoring young people for several decades in and around Germany, also stateside as well. Matter of fact, I just spoke with a group of young kids in Albany, New York. That was a great experience. And I do have some credentials to support that. In my local community, when I was in our Mannheim military community, I was a volunteer of the year in 2006 and 2009. I do have public leadership credentials from Harvard, and I do have other various leadership awards from in the military. For those who have been in the military who are familiar with Audie Murphy and Sergeant Morales, these are the highest leadership awards that can be earned by an enlisted member. So my leadership chops, they're there.
Pretty impressive.
The most important thing we should take away from that is leadership is not a noun. Leadership is a verb. Leadership is not a position. It is an activity.
Okay. I like that. As far as with parenting, where do you think leadership starts, especially parenting teens?
Derek, I think that's a great question. And let me start from this point. We have to talk about three different people before we get to the parents. We're talking about three different people.
Okay.
A coach, a mentor, and an advocate. All teens should know this. All parents should understand this because each one of these three people has a role. For example, a coach talks to you. A mentor talks with you.
Okay.
An advocate talks for you. So the role that the parent plays most oftentimes is the role of the coach.
Got it. Is it possible for someone to serve in all three roles?
Not usually.
I'm about to say effectively, is it possible?
Yeah, it's very difficult to be a player coach.
True.
What's most important is, and this is just from my experience, because I've worked with a lot of kids. As a matter of fact, a lot of the kids are now grown and in college, most of them out of college. But the importance of a coach is a coach talking to you. Like, for example, let's talk about the parents.
Okay.
Because we have to talk about the ecosystem of a teen's success. And the role that a parent plays, especially as a coach, the parent gives the teen life skills, and gives them encouragement.
Right.
Okay, that's what a coach does. The same if you played Pee Wee or Bronco League football, or you played volleyball, what did the coach do? The coach honed your skills, gave you guidance, gave you advice,
right?
Let you know how you played on the field, where you can improve, which is very different from a mentor.
Right.
Because a mentor can be within the industry or external to the industry, which is one of the things I talk about in my article. Because a mentor is going to guide you. within a given career or with a given problem set. And it's going to share information that you didn't have. And mentor relationships work in a couple of ways. They're either sought out or the mentor notices you and notices that you have some sort of ambition or desire in either self nominates that relationship, whether it be formal or informal. And the next part is the advocate. It's very difficult for the parent to play this role because the advocate talks for you. I'll give you a prime example. You're a young teen and you read a ad in the paper for a job. And you see someone or you meet someone that just happens to work for that firm. You meet them by happenstance. You might be at the grocery store or you might be at the mall and you just meet them by happenstance. And they say, hey, I really like you for this position. I'll call Jim and let them know they should take a serious look at your resume. Yeah, that's advocating.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah.
That's talking you up without you speaking for yourself. Because if you are your only advocate, then it becomes very difficult to become successful in the business or career or professional arena.
Right. And I like that too, because if it's someone else, a third party that's advocating for you versus a parent, it's just going to have more weight, right? In that scenario Absolutely. That you gave. Right. Okay. Got it. Now, I like that term you used, the ecosystem for teen success. So is those the three legs of the stool for the ecosystem?
Yes, if we start talking about the ecosystem, I'll give you a prime example. In order for any business or organization, let's say Google or even GM or one of these big corporations sets up a plant in your city. In order for that plant to survive, there has to be a gas station. There has to be a restaurant. There have to be schools. There have to be shopping malls. There have to be restaurants, because these are the things that your employees will need. So there has to be an ecosystem in order for the business to survive. So in saying that, in order for the team to be successful, there has to be an ecosystem. That ecosystem may or may not consist of school counselors, teachers, involves parents, friends of friends, and even some within the peer group. Because what all these people represent are external networks. Because one of the things I've learned in my career, and I like to think that it was successful, is I know that I got here by the glory and grace of God and by the kindness and assistance of others. So I can only imagine that it is the same for everyone else.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that as well. No one makes it alone. That is so true. Now, you mentioned your article. I had a chance to read your article. Can you tell us more about it? It's pretty fascinating. I think it certainly is relevant to this topic.
Yes. Matter of fact, my article is absolutely relevant to this topic. And I'm really glad we got a chance to come together. My article is called What Every Millennial and Centennial Needs to Know to Navigate Career Success. And I did provide you a link, so you can if you could please share the link on your podcast, on your website. I will,
certainly. Yep.
Or any other social media platforms that you have. It is an article that has received significant global reviews. I've heard from as far away as Hong Kong, Indonesia, India, Africa, Australia, Holland, and then, of course, across the U.S. Matter of fact, I just received a message from a good friend in Bulgaria who really enjoyed it, and he found significant value in it. So I know that the teens and the parents, parents as well, because it helps to expand upon what I addressed earlier with the ecosystem. There is something here for everybody. The target audience is obviously millennials and centennials.
Right.
But in order to bridge the generational gap, I highly recommend that parents read the article as well to understand that there are some significant generational gaps, not only divided by age, but how we communicate. I just had a great conversation with someone today, and they expressed to me in very certain terms how upset they were with me that I communicated in only acronyms and emojis. And so I said, well, this is how we communicate in the modern era.
Right.
And if you want to have a conversation over any type of platform, you need to learn this language. This is how the younger generation is communicating through acronyms, through emojis. For instance, communicating with someone from just older than my generation, obviously, baby boomers or the greatest generation. You should probably use full and complete sentences, correct pronunciation, then letters. So oftentimes this generational divide in how we communicate creates certain frustrations and conflicts. And I think that this article really helps to gain a better understanding to help bridge that gap as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Can you share with us, how were you able to bridge that communication gap? Because that's something that I certainly hear complaints from a lot of parents, is the issue with communicating with their teens and how they do communicate differently. And it's a disconnect. How are you able to bridge that gap?
Well, there's two things I do primarily. One thing is active listening. By active listening, I mean, don't listen just to respond.
Okay.
Listen to what people are telling you. And also reiterate what they said to gain understanding. Listen for understanding. Don't listen for response. That's what I would say, number one.
Okay. That's a
and
good
the
one.
next thing that I would say is, remember, everyone is not you. You cannot move forward looking in the rearview mirror. If your sentence begins with, well, when I was your age, or, back in the day, if your sentence begins like that, that's probably a clear indicator that you're not listening, because we have to put things in their proper context. Things that were okay in the 70s and 80s when I was growing up are not necessarily okay now. The culture has changed. The culture has made significant shifts. So we must communicate in the world that we're in, not in the world that we want to be in.
I love that. That is so true. And it's something you hear older generations say all the time. And it is a strong indicator that they're living in the past or just kind of stuck in their ways and not willing to change with the culture and the society. Yeah, that's a very good point. Back in my day, so especially if you're saying that to a teen or anyone,
Absolutely.
they're just gonna tune you out because they know you.
Absolutely, they have
understand.
No point of reference.
Right.
They have absolutely no point of reference. So I'll tell you another thing that's very interesting about this, and that's one of the things that forms the communications gap generationally. You have to make sure that the person you're talking to has a point of reference for what you're talking about.
Right. Not just assuming that they have that point of reference.
Absolutely.
That's true. Now, for the parents listening who are saying, hey, okay, I totally agree in terms of with the ecosystem and the importance of mentorship and having an advocate, what are some things they can do to really ensure that their teens have a advocate and a mentor?
Advice I would offer is, number one, remember that teens, whether we're talking about millennials, younger millennials, or if we're talking about centennials, they are not a monolithic group. Even within the group, you have subcultures. They're all different. True enough, they operate on common platforms and share common ideologies. They are not a monolithic group. So with that intimates is that you have to listen. Listen to what they're saying. There is a lot of things that are being communicated through nonverbals and through assumptions. We cannot assume when we're listening to others. We must ask, this is what I'm hearing. Am I hearing this correctly? Or some other means to confirm understanding. For example, men and women have a different language. There's a different language between religions. There's different language between cultures. There's a different language. We have to somehow come to a point where we are speaking the same language. Sometimes we have to agree to disagree.
Right.
But there is some area upon which we all do agree and we can communicate. So this is where we have to find this common meeting point. Oftentimes, and as a parent myself, the parent of a centennial, I find that sometimes the parent is too close to the situation.
Okay.
Every discussion is not a battle. And of course, every parent knows this. Every issue, is not a reason to go to war. We have to understand that as parents, because it took me a long time to come to this realization, is that one, they're going to be what they want to be, not what necessarily we want them to be.
Absolutely.
Encourage them to pursue their goals and their dreams. What we have to do is give them the appropriate life skills so that they can function, within their chosen industry or their chosen goals or desires. These life skills are very important. Analytical thought, creative thinking, reasoning, how to iron, how to wash clothes, how to wash dishes,
the fundamentals,
maybe how to mow the lawn.
Yeah.
All of these are life skills, because as they interact with others or as they interact with a boss, chores, I love chores, because chores are the precursor to how they will lead their professional lives. In fact, there's Admiral McCraven. He wrote a great book where he talked about making your bed.
Yeah.
You should make your bed first thing in the morning. What this does is this inherently promotes responsibility.
Yeah.
And of course, the better you get at it and the sharper your bed, this is what you carry into your office. This is what you carry into the workplace. That sense of being meticulous, of being organized, of paying attention to detail, noting the small things. This is what you carry into your day. This is a critical role of the parent. And another thing that parents have to understand, and once again, I came to this realization myself, once they turn 18 or 19, you have done your job.
Right.
They enter the greater adulthood. And there are just some lessons they're going to have to learn on their own.
Yeah. Like I say, the hard way sometimes. You don't want them to, but yeah, sometimes you have to learn firsthand experience. And it was funny you mentioned Admiral McCullough. I had watched, he has a video on YouTube that kind of summarizes that whole concept of making your bed. And my wife and I started doing that about a year ago after watching it, just because it makes so much sense as far as other things that it impacts and how you start off your day being organized and just a level of detail. Totally agree. Just the small things, those wins first thing in the morning.
Absolutely. And parents obviously understand the benefit of chores. I remember growing up, my stepmother used to always, every Saturday morning, she would get me up early to vacuum the floors, wash the windows, sweep the front porch. And I tell you, I hated it. But into my adult life, it really gave me a sense of responsibility. And these responsibilities permeated everything I did, whether it was volunteering at the local school, whether it was my daily work activities,
right,
whether it was working within a particular nonprofit organization or for-profit organization. That sense of responsibility was always there.
Mm-hmm.
But once again, the precursor to all of that was those chores.
Yeah, that's true. So true. Now, you mentioned the situations where parents may be too close to the situation. Can you elaborate on that more? And what are some indicators when the parent is too close to the situation?
Oh, I could go on for days on this. I know working with my daughter, I pressed her hard throughout her formative years You have to get A's. You have to get A's. You have to get A's. Well, the honest truth is no, you don't. What you have to do is understand. That's what you have to do. You have to understand. I had the most difficult time in math in school. I had the most difficult time. I just didn't get it.
Yeah, makes two of us.
and my parents, they beat me up about it. Why can't you do better? You should be doing better. You make A's and B's and everything else. Why not this? And because it's so close, all that pressure, I still didn't do well in math. So because they were so close to the situation, obviously I'm their kid. That didn't help. What really helped was a mentor, someone to tutor me after school. That's what helped, because there's no bias. They're at the absolute neutral party, and they can speak to the behavior. And oftentimes that's what parents do. They speak to the behavior and not the substance.
Okay.
And when I mean substance, I'm talking about math principles, whether it's the associative property of addition or multiplication, whether it's distributive properties of multiplication and division. Most parents are not going to deep dive into that layer of the conversation. It's going to be like, do your homework. I'm going to bring you home early after school. They're addressing the behavior, but not the fundamentals. And that's where we come back to that three-legged stool again.
Yeah.
And we come back to the mentor, because at that point, the parent is being the coach. When what the child really needs is a mentor. And oftentimes as parents, we can be too close to the situation and we're over coaching and under mentoring.
It goes back to, like say the stool, and why you said it's hard to be a player coach. You need that segmentation. I get it. Yeah, I really love that concept. Now, going back to the active listening, for those who really don't understand the difference between listening to respond and listening to understand, can you explain that more?
Yes, absolutely. Because I like many people, and I'm guilty. I'm guilty of doing it at times.
Yeah, me too.
I'm like, ooh, I can't wait till they finish. I've got this prepared answer. Oh, I can't wait. I'm ready.
Right.
I'm ready with the response. But what I missed is what the person was really trying to convey. Oftentimes, the people you talk to do not have a master's in communication. They are not experts in English. They are conveying a message in the best way that they know how.
Right.
So with that as the foundation, we as listeners should be active listeners. We should always be in a learning mode. I want to understand. So what that implies is active listening asks questions. Non-active listening has prepared statements.
Okay.
Or my favorite response is, oh, I understand. I understand what you're saying. Oh, yeah, I got it. Well, the fact is, no, you don't got it. And no, you don't understand. Because you didn't ask a question to confirm understanding.
Right. And that's such a powerful question you gave us earlier, is pretty much like, okay, after you hear them, you listen. Okay, it sounds like you're saying this, just to confirm with them before you conclude what they're saying, what the message is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Just that asking the right questions. People have written whole books on it.
One thing I can tell you that Harvard taught me was just how to ask better questions.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the big takeaway. Taught me how to ask better questions.
It's priceless.
That's what we all have to do. We all have to be in learning mode. And I don't think there's anyone in your audience or even beyond that doesn't want to learn, that doesn't want to understand, and doesn't want to know. Sometimes we have to put our ego or our pride, which can be based on gender,
okay,
which can be based on generation, which can be based on religion, it can be based in a lot of things. Put that aside and substitute that for understanding, and always remain in the learning mode.
Great advice. Now, you mentioned too, what are some nonverbal, I guess, indicators that maybe parents are not hearing the message that their teens are trying to convey?
I'm glad you asked. It's one of my favorite. My daughter used to do it all the time. The rolling the eyes, the looking up in the air, what that signals is frustration. You're not listening. Or another popular phrase that my daughter used to use is, "I know that. You already said that."
Yeah.
And granted, I didn't like to hear it, and it took me many years to really understand what she's saying. Is, you know what? Repetitive information has its place.
Okay.
But new information is often more valuable. I'll give you a perfect example. I noticed a great difference between how my mother communicated and my father communicated. It's a very important takeaway. I think if anyone in your audience is listening to this podcast and you didn't get anything else, you might want to take this away. My mother and father communicated very different. And I don't want to say it's a gender thing. My father would say, "Son, go clean your room." And I would say, "Okay." I would go in my room and do some things. He would come back and look. And he would say, "Your room is not clean." I said, "Okay, well, what does that mean? What does that entail?" And of course, he couldn't say.
What's the standard?
But my mother never said, "Go clean your room." She said, "I need you to go to your room, put your shoes away, put your dirty clothes in the basket, make up your bed, clean off your desk." She didn't say clean your room.
Specificity.
She gave me tasks.
Okay.
She gave me tasks that equal go clean your room. She never had to say go clean your room. She gave me tasks. And I've seen this in countless households with friends of mine. I see once again my dad would say, "Hey boy, go take out the trash." Okay. Oh, okay, then what? What? My mother would never say that. My mother would say, "I want you to walk around the house, check every room, get all the trash bags. I want you to put them in this big trash bag. I want you to take this big trash bag and put it in the bin outside and roll it to the corner." Those are much clearer, much more succinct directions. She didn't say, "Go take out the trash," because that implies a lot of understanding. That implies that I understand what you understand. When oftentimes, guess what? I don't.
Right. Back to that point of reference you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, so I don't have a point of reference because clean your room when you were growing up might not mean the same thing as clean your room a generation or two later.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great takeaway amongst the long list of other great takeaways you're giving us. Now, one thing I certainly want to touch on before we wrap up this interview, I know you retired from the military, and serving in the military, especially in senior leadership roles, you are encountering a lot of teenagers as they're coming into the military. What were some common issues in terms of gaps in terms of life skills that you saw lacking in new soldiers into the military?
One of the big ones I saw was a lack of critical thinking, lack of life skills. And matter of fact, I think that's enough. Life skills are so broad. The young people, they couldn't manage their money. They didn't know how to iron their clothes.
Those life skills are vital.
Protocols of respect, and just how to engage other people. Washing their clothes. I mean, you name it. The life skills one is huge. And let me just touch on critical thinking.
Okay.
Critical thinking involves thinking completely through a process, looking at the second and third order effects of actions or ideas. For example, I had a lot of folks that I worked around who, unfortunately, received DUIs. Let's use that as an example. What they did was they just took the car. They went downtown. They went to the local pub or wherever young people go to party.
Right.
And had some drinks and drove back. Now, critical thinking says, "Hey, I'm not going to drive. I'm going to take the public transportation system. So in case I drink, I have a way back. But most oftentimes my friends will be there so I can catch a ride back.
Mm-hmm.
So that's applying some critical thinking skills, thinking through the process.
Right.
Or, hey, you know what? I'm going to drive to the nearest train station. I'll catch the train downtown. So that way, if I drink too much, if I do, I can catch the train all the way back, to where I live and go get my car in the morning. Or if I don't drink at all, I can just catch the train back to my car.
Right.
So that's just a way of applying some critical thinking skills and thinking through a process and looking at the second, third order effects of making a decision. And you see this run rampantly. So oftentimes when young people come into the military, the supervisor not only serves as a supervisor, but also in some form of surrogate parenting.
Big time. Absolutely. those NCOs have to play that dual role. No doubt.
Absolutely. Yeah. And now that gets complicated when you have a leader that doesn't have parenting skills. Uh-huh. So now we've exacerbated the problem. So now this, as parents give us their blood and treasure, which is their son or daughter, them in a situation where the person can't pass them along either because they don't have that particular skill set.
Right. My grandmother used to say the blind leading the blind.
Correct. So now this goes back to the ecosystem. This goes back to that three-legged stool. And this is should be a significant point of reference between who is the coach, who is the mentor, and who is the advocate.
All right. Got it. So the question comes to mind with the critical thinking skills. What's an effective way to build those during those teen years? What can parents do to develop those critical thinking skills?
What I would say is we have to be leery of doing what we commonly do and falling into the parent trap. By the parent trap, I mean, and let me word this very carefully, imposing our will for imposing our will's sake.
Okay.
One of my favorite quotes when I was growing up, my mother and father used to say, hey, do this. Okay, I'll do it, but why? Because I said so.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily offer the clarity or the conciseness that's needed. Because once again, at that age, you just don't have that point of reference. And they will do it, but that's not really helping the overall objective.
Okay.
We have to avoid the parent trap. How we develop these critical thinking skills is to use what's called the Socratic method. What the Socratic method does, we ask a basic question, okay, but we don't put the solution in the question, but we help them to think through the process.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, just same way. I know they use that in law school, the Socratic method to build those critical thinking skills. That's
absolutely.
I haven't heard someone mention it in terms of parenting. I like that a lot. Yeah.
Yes, because what's important is, and I say something really funny. I love how people ask a question and put the answer in the question. Did you call Pam yet? Well, if you ask them, did I call Pam? I mean, you answered your question. Ask a question that is leading to where you want to go, but allow them to think through the question.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. Awesome. Dr. Carter, is one more question I have before I let you go. I know you're a busy man. We also had a time difference. But you mentioned something that really stood out to me. So when you think of such a prestigious institution like Harvard, Ivy League, you said what your biggest takeaway from there, though, was to ask better questions. Expound on that some more.
What I mean by ask better questions, this goes back to earlier statement I made earlier about being in learning mode. A bad question to ask is why. because why means you want someone to explain something to your satisfaction. Because most oftentimes we view things through an ethnocentric lens. You know, our way is the best way.
Right.
Or why didn't you do it my way? Why is not necessarily a good question when you're dealing with someone one-on-one. A better question is, help me understand your thought process. Help me understand how you came to this conclusion. Never put the answer in the question. Leave the question open.
Mm-hmm.
Closed questions do not necessarily elicit understanding. Open questions do.
Okay.
How does that make you feel? Or how did you feel when you were doing this? Now you're understanding. Because if someone is frustrated, you ultimately you want to get to the root of the frustration.
Right.
For example, even with me in math, once again, my parents addressed the behavior, but they never tackled the substance of my problem. The substance. So what that ultimately turned into was I was expressing frustration, probably my frustration that I don't understand.
Right.
And they never really addressed that problem. But a teacher and a counselor at school says, hey, I see your grades and I think I may have a solution. I'm going to set you up with this tutor, which serves the mentor
role. Got it.
To help analyze what you're not understanding.
Got it.
So now, once I began to understand these different mathematic principles, the frustration dissipated.
Okay. So in that scenario, the teacher was serving as an advocate, right, on your behalf?
The counselor was serving as
the counselor. Yeah.
Because the counselor found the tutor.
Yeah, that's what I meant, the counselor. Yeah.
The teacher,
circle.
the teacher is the mentor.
Okay. Yeah, the teacher was a tutor. Yep.
Let me talk to you after class. Everyone leaves the class. He says, hey, I see you didn't do so well on this test. What I recommend is you read over these properties. I'm going to give you some extra homework so I can see, this is the analysis, so I can see what you don't understand. So now everyone fits once again on this three-legged stool.
Yeah.
But they're asking, each person asking, remember, the parent's asking a question, but the question's not necessarily related to the substance. Now, the teacher's asking a question that's related to the substance.
Right.
The advocate is asking a question about your availability.
Okay.
I can have the tutor available after school at 3:15, 4:15, or 5:15. What time works best for you?
Accommodating you. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Remember, each person's asking different questions. It really depends on the role that you're fulfilling on what questions to ask. Wow.
That's a brilliant concept. I'm going to remember forever. Hopefully parents taken away. I love it. Well, Dr. Carter, you've given us a lot of value over this interview. I really appreciate it. A lot of strategies, practical strategies that parents can incorporate today. So that's what really the whole focus is of this podcast. So we really appreciate it. Dr. Carter, what would be the best way for listeners to get in contact with you?
LinkedIn is a great location. I do Facebook.
Okay.
I'll make sure I send that to you.
Yeah, I'll include all this in
so that you can share with your listeners.
Yep.
And then I'm also on Twitter as well. And I'll make sure I send that to you to share with your audience.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again, Dr. Carter. We really appreciate it. And like I said, giving a ton of value and thing. I've been taking a whole page of notes that my daughter, she's 6 months now, so I have a while, but I'm starting incorporating these concepts early. The earlier, the better.
Well, I tell you what, brother, you know what? As a young parent or a parent of a extremely young person, I will offer you this advice. And trust me, I'm not in the habit of giving parental advice. Lord knows I made enough mistakes. But I will give you the benefit of this mistake that I made for many years. And I got this from one of my mentors. Stay away from the word No. Stay away from negative reinforcement because negative reinforcements shape your child's thought process. Use positive reference. And let me example that. Let's say your child is doing something and you say, no, don't do that.
Right.
Well, when the child goes to school and something happens, what is the child going to say to someone else?
Same. No.
No, don't do that. No is a negative reinforcement. Flip that coin over. Let's use a positive reinforcement. Hey, let's try this. I know it's a lot of people who work at the nursery. They'll say, hey, let's play a game. Because that works really well with younger people because that is a form of positive reinforcement. Because I'll tell you, I also teach it. I teach at the university as well. And one of the biggest things they teach us is when you're grading a paper, never write on a paper, you didn't do this. You didn't do that. Always write, this is a good start. However, next time, or reference the APA manual, 7th edition, this page, this paragraph. That is a more positive reinforcement. It's looking forward.
Right. Yeah.
And it's developmental. And that goes back to what you were asking before about developing critical thinking skills. It's just like animals. There are only certain animals that can survive in stagnant water.
Okay.
And there are animals that survive in fresh water.
Right.
For example, a salmon can never survive in a swamp.
Right. Flowing water.
He can't. He needs fresh water. That's the environment a salmon needs. Frogs, they can survive in stagnant water because the environment is conducive to who and what they are. So it's about creating an environment for what you really want to achieve. So positive reinforcement is always great. And for everything that you can think of a negative reinforcement, don't do this. You can think of a positive reinforcement.
Let's try this.
I would like for you to do this. Let's try this.
Love that.
Or another thing I like, you say something, but make it their idea.
Let them be the hero.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because what that does is that builds confidence.
Yep.
It builds self-esteem. And I will tell you, these are things that are key in your professional career. They are key. They're key in high school.
Yeah.
Confidence and self-esteem. The big takeaway here is negative reinforcements are just, it chips away at confidence and self-esteem. And ultimately, that's how they're going to engage other people. Refrain from words like can't, don't, won't, all those contract. You can.
Well, that's an excellent tip to leave us off with, Dr. Carter. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much for having me, Derek. And I appreciate you for inviting me. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Wow. Talk about value packed. Dr. Carter did not disappoint. He just gave us so much invaluable insight, guidance, practical tips that parents can incorporate today. I know I was taking a lot of notes and things, especially with the positive reinforcement. My daughter's 7 months and we're already decided that's our approach for parenting her, positive reinforcement. And Dr. Carter gave a lot of great practical strategies for implementing positive reinforcement. I know a lot of parents may think it's easier said than done, especially with teens, but it's so important because as Dr. Carter said, that positive reinforcement, it builds their confidence, self-esteem, critical thinking skills. So it's worth the effort. And also, I just want to quickly recap about the 3-legged stool. Think about the role that you're playing, whether it's the coach, mentor, or advocate. And also make sure that your teen has that ecosystem of it, that coach, mentor, advocate. And don't try to play all 3 roles because each has separate duties and responsibilities. So parents, I hope you got a lot of value from that episode. Be sure to reach out to Dr. Carter, let him know what resonated with you. Also email me at derich@mentorselect.com and let me know just some topics you'd like for me to cover in the future. Anyone you'd like for me to interview. Hey, I'm here to serve you, parents. So use me as a resource. And don't forget, it takes a community to raise a team.
You've been listening to Mentor Select. Mentor Select. Parenting teens to be successful adults. Hosted by Derich Phillips. Raising teenagers is hard. Understatement of the century. We get it. That's why Dare Rich interviews leading experts that work with teens, educators, counselors, mentors, and authors to give you practical tips, strategies, and resources that you can incorporate immediately to better connect and understand your teen. That's why we do the show. Be sure to share Mentor Select with other parents of teens. Follow us on social media at Mentor Select to stay up to date on the latest tips, strategies, and resources for parenting teens. Send your questions and comments to darerich@mentorselect.com. Tune in every Wednesday for new episodes. Till next time, this is Mentor Select.